Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Here we are from Group 6 will present about the issue of language learning and speaking learning. This is our group member. They are Nadia Salma, Aisyah Umi, Hanna Nabila, Widea, and Syafa'ah Setyoningtiyas. The first is introduction. What is language? Language is used in our daily interaction to fulfill many different goals, such as communicating information, ideas, beliefs, emotions, and attitude to one another. This skill is also very complicated as it relies not only on the teacher's competence in promoting knowledge and giving feedback on the oral outcome, but needs as well the learner's willingness and acceptance of teachers' oral correction to refine their performance. The spoken language. What is the spoken? The Oxford Pocket Dictionary of Current English 2009 defines speaking as the action of conveying information or expressing one thought and feeling in spoken language. It is considered as one of the most difficult skills in language learning beside writing, listening, reading once. According to Taron 2005, speaking is usually viewed as the most complex and difficult skill to master. The basic idea in any oral interaction is that the speaker has the objective of transmitting his ideas, feelings, attitudes, and information to the hearer through speech. The element necessary for spoken production is, according to Harmer 2001, the ability to speak fluent presupposes not only knowledge of language feature but also the ability to process information and language on the spot, such as knowledge of vocabulary, syntax, and the ability to use resource connector. In addition, speaking is a skill constitutes a real hurdle to overcome both the teacher and the learners. Murcia and Altain 2000 claim that oral communication can be considered as challenging and easy at the same time. Therefore, in an attempt to master speaking as a skill, learners have to develop, in addition to the linguistic competence and compensatory strategies. In sum, it is obvious that the spoken language is very difficult to acquire. Therefore, concentrating spoken and written language, which will be developed in the next section, constitutes a must to improve EFL learners' conversational competence. Thank you.
Now, I will explain about contrasting spoken and written languages. Let's see in what terms are they contrast in. The first is in the terms of communication. It's clearly different in this term because spoken is the communication that happens with the presence of two speakers at the same place, while written happens with a device, so then it don't really need the presence of two speakers at the same place. The second is in terms of how the meaning expressed. When we do a spoken communication, the interlocutor will exactly understand the meaning of the sentence because he or she immediately hear the tone voice of the speaker and the speaker's expression. While in written communication, the interlocutor cannot hear the tone or see the expression of the sender message. These simple things will affect to the reader understanding. The last is in the terms of the time when the conversation happened. The spoken communication In spoken communication, the conversation happened in real time. So then the speaker have no time to planning, editing, or revising her or his sentence. While in written communication, the sender have enough time to plan, edit, or even to revise some of errors in her or his writing. Now, we can categorize the contrast of spoken and written language as what we see in this table. The first, spoken is happen in real time, while written is happen in flexible time. Spoken have no time for planning, editing, and revising, while written have enough time for planning, editing, and revising. The third, the errors of spoken communication called spell errors, while in written it called type errors. And the last, in spoken language, requires the presence of the interlocutor, and the written, the interlocutor presence is not too necessary.
Hello, my name is Hanna Nabila. I am the next speaker of this presentation. The material is consciousness raising. So, what is consciousness raising? Consciousness raising is also known as awareness raising. Is part of the process a learner can go through with a new language. So, by making the students have consciousness or awareness, it can encourage them to think deeply about examples of language and to infer how language functions. Ellis in 2002 defined consciousness raising as an attempt to equip learners with an understanding of a specific grammatical features to develop declarative rather than procedural knowledge of it. The main characteristics of consciousness raising activities proposed by Ellis in 2002 is involve isolating specific linguistic features, explicit rule description, using intellectual effort to understand and articulating the rules describing the grammatical features. In summary, learners are required to pay attention, to notice, and to understand certain features of language. The ways in which consciousness raising activities might be achieved. Willis and Willis in 1996 list some steps to achieve them. These include identifying the patterns, classifying them, hypothesizing, and then exploring language cross-linguistically, and finally manipulating language to extract the underlying patterns. Thornbury in 2005 outlined, in his examination of the knowledge and skills needed for the student to speak, there are three-step program to develop EFL learners' spoken skill involving awareness raising activities, and then appropriation, and the last one is autonomy. There also one way to help learners uncover the gaps of their language begins with presenting learners with or letting them discover features of spoken language. After understanding the rules and their use, they can apply them in different spoken genres.
My name is Widea. The next material is approaches to the teaching of speaking. One way to intervene in the process of language learning is through instruction, as concern the teaching of conversation in the second language programs. Current literature, early 2005, Hedge 2000, Richard 1990. Thornbury and Slay 2006 indicates that there are two major approaches that can be applied in the teaching of conversation. The first is the indirect approach and the direct approach. The indirect approach. In this attempt to deal with the teaching of conversation, Richard 1990, 76 until 77 makes a distinction between two major approaches aforementioned. According to him, the indirect approach is an approach in which conversational competence is seen as the product of engaging learners in conversational interaction. In other words, learners can develop their spoken skill via their participation in communicative activities. Moreover, Thornbury and Slade 2275 state that the indirect approach assumes that learners can acquire conversational competence simply by doing it. Next is Alice 2005, 700 to 25. On his part, point out that indirect intervention, with its emphasis on learning through communication, is likely to result in linguistic knowledge that isn't deployable, that learners can actually access when asked to engage in real life communication. The justification for an indirect approach to the teaching of conversation is based on the notion laid out by Creation and second language acquisition theories, which state that language can be unconsciously acquired through conversation and exposure to comprehensible input. uh, Richard 1990-77 SLA researchers have argued that learners gradually acquire the rules underlying uh, language through conversation. However, um, there exists a certain hesitancy in recommending this instructional approach, justified by the fact that it focuses on the form of language and the absence of a clear model to follow when designing a course for indirect intervention. Next is the direct approach. The advocates of the direct approach argue that speaking skills should be taught explicitly via consciousness raising activities. Head 2000, Richard 1990, Thornbury 2006, and Knight 2008, Thornbury and Slade 2006. Richard 1990, 77. For instance, stress, stress the importance of providing learners with opportunity to have conversation. He asserts that the direct approach involves planning a conversation program around the specific micro skill, strategies, and processes that are involved in fluent conversation. Thornbury and Slide 2006, 275 support this idea by indicating that the direct approach presupposes the need for a form-focused interactional stage at some point in the lesson cycle. The direct approach to teaching conversation raises learners' awareness of the nature, system, and patterns implemented in conversation, as it focuses on techniques introduced in casual conversation. The latter can be applied by involving certain aspects, a strategy for turn taking, topic control, and refined conversational routines, fluency, pronunciation, and difference between formal and casual conversational style. 1990 79. Likewise, learners gain knowledge on how and where to make use of certain fixed phrases and expressions that are abundant in spoken English, discovered by implementing some aspect of conversation. This, according to Thornbury and Slate, 2006 276, may take the form of discourse markers and conversational gambits, such as conversationalize, a way of opening and closing conversation, of turn taking, and of back channeling, etc. And they may take the form of conversationalist, a way of performing a certain speech acts, such as apologize, requesting, and taking. Thanking. To sum up, this section has attempted to explore the major approaches to the teaching of conversation to EFL learners. It is evident that each approach has its properties, and it is not possible to declare that the direct approach is superior to the indirect one or vice versa. Nor is it possible to declare that focused interaction on one will lead to better learning than another. Consequently, a balance between explicit awareness raising techniques and indirect methods is suitable to provide competent speakers of language. Furthermore, when dealing with teaching speaking, one cannot avoid tracing teachers' intervention while correcting learners' oral performance. Oral performance. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
I'm Syafa'ah Setyoningtiyas. I'm the last speaker of this presentation. Number 6, we have oral corrective feedback. Learners make error in oral practice, then teacher responds or corrects and gives information to revise. Timing of correction. According to Catron, 1988, it is the teacher who is responsible of determining the appropriate type of correction and it's suitable for that. The latter depend on the teacher view on language and on the approach of the teaching they rely on. In fact, timing of the correction differ from one method of teacher to one another. According to the Bratton, 2003, that immediate feedback is vital for learners as it allows them to know how well they understood the newly learned form. This timing of correction is also supported by the behaviorists who suggest that errors should be corrected as soon as they occur because they might cause fossilization. However, some teaching of approach were against immediate correction and indicate that delayed correction or ignorance of error is the best way to help develop learning their interlanguage. The communicative language teaching approach refuted the behaviorist view. The error in this method are regarded as a natural process through which learners go while acquiring a new language and represent a proof of to teachers that learning is taking place. Many linguists were in support of delayed correction. Brown in 2007, for instance, proposed that delayed correction is more suitable for communication activity. Besides, conducting a delayed correction, all learners can benefit from the correction. Another linguist who was in favor of delayed correction is Mendelssohn in 1990, who states that in oral production, learners should be corrected till they finish the communication in order to avoid interrupting while they're communicating. Other linguists suggested that the timing of correction depends on different factors. According to Scrivener, 1994, the time of correction is based on the goal of the activity. For example, if the objective is accuracy, immediate correction is appropriate. However, if the focus is on fluency, later correction is called as for it. Strategies for oral error correction. Leister and Ranta suggested 6 types of corrective feedback. The first is explicit correction. It refers to the explicit provision of the correct form, as the teacher provides the correct form, then clearly indicates that what the student had said was incorrect. The next is recourse. It is generally implicit and involves the teacher's reformulation of all or part of a student's utterance minus the error. Clarification request. It refers to problems in connecting with either comprehensibility or accuracy or both. It indicates to students either that their utterance has been misunderstood by the teacher or that the utterance is ill-formed in some way. Metalinguistic feedback. It contains either comment, information, or question related to well-informedness of the student utterance without explicitly providing the correct form. Elicitation, as another type of corrective feedback, includes pause allowing students to fill in the blanks, question eliciting correct form, reformulating utterance by student. The last is repetition. Repetition as the last strategy for oral error correction refers to highlighting the student's erroneous utterance by adjusting its tone